Hi everyone, John Heath here again for MiltonRose Learning with another Let's Learn video on Death of a Salesman context. Okay, so we're all about the illusions of the American dream here and being crushed by capitalism. So we're going to tease out some of the key contextual factors around those kind of themes. Then we'll look at how that context really plays into the inaction into the play itself and affects the kind of characterization and the narrative. And then we'll finish by 3 of the best contextual quotes that you can then drop into your essays and try and get the high marks. Okay, so first off, let's have a nice look at the context. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so as we can see there, with the traditional kind of American housewife, the key features of 1940s America. So first off, we have a time of kind of post-Great Depression America, and there was economic insecurity here. So it left many families kind of struggling with some job losses, and poverty was still patchy in American society. It's hard to kind of wrap our heads around now, obviously, with America being a superpower, but it did have a time in this period where it was a bit patchy in terms of its economics. So success was very uncertain despite loads of hard work. You could really work your socks off and still not succeed or get much money here because of the disparity in the kind of economics of the country. Second key contextual point is traditional gender roles. So men were expected to be breadwinners, to bring the money home basically, and women would manage the home. So often kind of failing to provide, to be a breadwinner for a man often led to shame and identity crises, as we see with Willy Loman. Okay, it's kind of when they don't feel like they're bringing home the money, they start to kind of worry, and it leads to kind of mental trauma and things like that. So it's a really, really big issue in this period. Then moving on, we have, again with a charming image there of US consumerism, we have, there was big changes in US society. So post-war identity crisis. So first off then, Willy's breakdown, which he has, reflects the uncertainty that that kind of many men felt in post-war World War II America, where traditional roles and social values were starting to shift. A lot of people came back after World War II and wanted to change American society and things like that. And those who were kind of left behind really struggled to keep up with that. And it led to, their identity crises, which is explored through the character of Willy, obviously. And then I think a big contextual point there as well is the illusory American dream. So the American dream, as we've saw in other videos, probably if you've had a look on the channel, the American dream is the simple concept that if you work really hard, anybody can make it. You can become rich and powerful and live in a big house and have a fast car and all this kind of stuff. But for many people, it's not true, and it's an illusion. So the rise of advertising and consumerism in the 1940s and 50s, which the image kind of really symbolises there, created expectations of success, where, you think, oh, it looks really good in the magazines and stuff, so I'm going to make it myself. But often those expectations are unrealistic, and it kind of fuels Willy's obsession with image. He's constantly chasing this American dream and thinks, I'm going to be as good as kind of in the advertising, but it just never happens. The American dream is shown to be one big lie to many people, and that's the ultimate tragedy of the play. He's chasing an impossible dream. Okay, so how does this play out with Arthur Miller's views then? The kind of big man, he's looking very, very serious there. So what do we think he believes? Well, if I was teaching your class, I would be highlighting 2 kind of big points here. I think first off, in Death of a Salesman, Arthur Miller is critiquing the American dream. He's showing how the dream of success can trap ordinary people in a false hope. It provides them with this kind of false narrative of success and you're going to be a millionaire and things like that. But it's all just a lie, and you're never going to get there anyway. It's kind of quite pessimistic in that sense, in my opinion. So it leads to disillusionment and despair, because obviously when your hopes and dreams are dashed, then how do you react? Well, mental trauma and potentially mental illness. So it's kind of almost, to Arthur Miller, the American dream is a bit like a sick joke. It's kind of just, it looks all glossy in the advertising, but it's something which 99.9% of people will never reach, and Willy Loman will never reach. So it's an extremely savage critique of the American dream. That's the first thing to understand from Arthur Miller's perspective. The second thing is broader than that. It's an attack on capitalism, our whole economic system. So he exposes a system that values profit over people, because ultimately that's what capitalism is. I'm no Marxist, but capitalism is inbuilt kind of to a degree on exploitation and things like that, and of people's labour. And it shows ultimately how Willy is discarded once he's no longer useful to a capitalist system. So once he no longer has the skills or the ability to sell his labour on the market, then that's it. Okay, you're just almost chewed up and spat out by capitalism. So I think Arthur Miller is very much kind of critiquing capitalism as well as the American dream. I think it's got a dual track approach there. Okay, so with that in mind, how does this play out in context? As you can see, it is all about money, really, in some ways. It's the monopoly money there. Now let's look then, how does it play out in the play itself? Well, first off then, we have capitalism and the American dream. So Willy Loman's obsession with success, in inverted commas, shows the dark side of the American dream, where self-worth is tied to money. If you've got money and status and you look good, then you are doing well in American society. But as we've learned, not everyone can be a millionaire. So when characters like Willy Loman don't become millionaires and become successful, it often leads to failure and despair, because these characters now feel like they're not worth anything in capitalist society. So it triggers this kind of negative, almost doom spiral, where the character just goes down and down and down and down, and can't ever reconcile their identity with not having all the money and success that they want. Very tragic in that sense. Then we have gender roles and family expectations. So Linda, obviously the wife of Willy, so Linda's quiet suffering and support of Willy reflect the 1940s ideal of the loyal housewife, because women in this period were seen to, support your man to go out and earn a living. Whilst Willy pressures Biff, the son obviously, to live up to a narrow masculine definition of success. So Willy is kind of like schooling Biff in a negative way to kind of, if I'm honest, just to repeat the mistakes that he's making. So it's almost a double tragedy of Willy kind of leading this kind of very silly existence, but then trying to get his son to live up to it as well, which he can never live up to, and kind of repeat the mistake. So that makes it a double tragedy, if I can put it that way. Then we have generational conflict and disillusionment. So Biff's rejection, though, of his father's dream shows a post-war shift in values. As we know at the start of the lesson, that American society was changing, and Biff is a different generation, so he sees things in a very, very different way. So younger generations began questioning this materialism, just kind of buying stuff constantly, bigger houses, cars, clothes, and all that materialistic stuff that didn't really mean anything. And he chases more authentic personal fulfillment, because I agree with Biff up to a point. Life isn't all about kind of material things. There are other things in life that probably create happiness as well, but it's just not part of the American dream. So there's a real social conflict there, almost an ideological conflict as well, that it'd be good for you to reflect on that for your essays. Now, with that in mind then, let's have a look at some of the key quotes. Okay. So, first off then, we've got Willy Loman. I do like that image. He's bewailing his life there. Okay, so let's have a look at Willy's kind of American dream. So it said he's liked, but not well liked. Now that shows Willy's belief that charm, being liked by people, equals success. And that, in a sense, reflects capitalist ideals up to a point. But Miller is critiquing that shallow version of the American dream. So being liked doesn't really equate to anything. It's not anything I can take to the bank. It's not going to lead necessarily to success. So he has this kind of very misplaced, very shallow conception of charm equaling success, which just is so far away from the truth that it's just kind of almost whimsical and silly, really. But it's nevertheless a really interesting quote to show Willy's psychology in terms of the American dream. Then we have the ever-suffering Linda. Okay, so let's have a look here then. So Linda on struggle. So she says, quite a revealing quote here, "A small man can be just as exhausted as a great man." So let's unpick that together. So it highlights that working class hardship and demands, and she's almost demanding dignity for ordinary people in a post-war capitalist world. She's saying kind of the working class and people like Willy, who have to go out and earn an honest crust, they are working in a sense just as hard as the kind of bigwigs who own all the factories and all the kind of office blocks and all this kind of stuff. The working class matter. And I think that's what that quote is really getting at. And it's almost feeling like Arthur Miller's talking to us there directly through Linda. And it's kind of trying to kind of stand up for the working class people in this capitalist society that almost doesn't care about them and just kind of gets rich off their labour. And then, always got to give the last word to Willy. Let's have a little look at this one then. Okay, so Willy's regret, so towards the back end of the play. He says, he uses an interesting metaphor. Nothing's planted. I don't have a thing in the ground. Now, what he's kind of saying there is he has no irons in the fire, no kind of ways of making money that's going to kind of like a plant growing that's going to kind of blossom and then he can take the money from it. But he says, I've got nothing planted. So it symbolises Willy's failure and the growing disillusionment with the American dream. He's kind of getting a bit tired of it by now. And he's kind of left with nothing real or lasting. Nothing's planted. He's saying, like, I'm just going to get nothing out of this. So you've kind of wasted, I wouldn't say wasted your life, but you've kind of just been chasing a dream that was never going to happen for you. And that's the ultimate cruelty of the American dream. It lies to people. This is what Arthur Miller would say. It lies to people with clever advertising and glossy kind of magazines and things like that. But you can never really reach it. And then when you kind of collapse in a heap because you haven't reached it, well, that's just the end, and there's nothing more to be done. So it's, again, quite pessimistic there, and I really feel empathy and sympathy there for Willy. It's actually quite an emotional kind of quote there. Okay then, so let's just have a nice little overview at the end. So we've teased out some of the key contextual factors about 1940s America and some of the changes that were happening. We've teased out as well some of the context in action, so critiquing capitalism and the American dream, especially within this play. And then we've just pulled out three of the best key contextual quotes, which would be really good for you to analyse. And then, like I say, as I normally say, pop those into your essays and into your exams, as long as you analyse them really, really well. Okay then, so obviously if you found this lesson useful, please don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, tap the bell icon, tell all your friends. Obviously we really want to grow the channel as big as we can, really. Keep checking the channel as well on YouTube, because we'll be uploading videos every week, of course, and expanding the content even further. And it just remains to say, obviously, thanks for listening and take care.